everyone. Welcome to this webinar where we're going to be looking at money considerations that you should think about when becoming a parent. So that's whether you're thinking about becoming a parent, you've already started on that journey, or if, like me, you are sort of a number of years in now and quickly realising that children are very expensive. Now, Sarah's done a fabulous job of already introducing me, and it's always wonderful to be able to support ICE and IMechE members. But just from a sort of compliance aspect, it's important to note that the webinar is providing information only. So there's no financial advice being given. We're just aiming to give you the tools and the knowledge to make your own decisions about your personal finances. It's also important to note Better with Money's totally independent. We have no products to sell. So if I do mention companies or websites along the way, it's just because we genuinely believe they offer good services, which you can explore at your leisure. Take advantage of if you wish, but certainly not because we've got any financial incentive for you to do so. Now, as Sarah mentioned, we welcome questions, so please do keep them coming in, and we'll have plenty of time at the end as well to be able to run through those. So over the next sort of just under half an hour, we're going to explore some of the key parenting milestones and the financial considerations that are associated with these. So we're going to start by looking at budgeting to start a family. We'll then move into parental leave, sort of pay and pension related concerns. We'll then look at the returning to work and focusing on sort of childcare options and costs. And then we're going to look forward. So where can we find those sources of help? Of course, as your children sort of grow up, the financial commitments remain. So we'll look to explore that and where you can go for that continued support as well. And then any questions, we'll be able to cover those at the end. Now, to kick us off, it's fair to say that many people do think about having children long before the children actually arrive. And that is really sensible because having children not only sort of changes how you live your life, but it's also a major financial commitment that does require planning as well. Now, according to the Times, the average amount of money spent on raising a child from birth up to 18 in the UK is currently around £223,256. So that works out at about £12,400 per year, or even £1,030 per month if you want to think about it like that. So some quite scary figures. If we look at research by Maternity Action, they suggest that 96% of new mums worry about money whilst being on maternity leave. 56% reported that money stress affected sort of their health and well-being. And sort of as with any major life event, it is a good idea to ensure that you've got a handle on what your finances look like now, but also how they might change once that new arrival is here. And this will hopefully help to reduce stress and anxiety around money, but also, allow you to enjoy this really amazing chapter in your life as well. Now, first things first, we need to know our budget, which is quite simply your income compared with your expenditure. So you may have a budget already, which is fantastic, but if not, there's lots of helpful budget planners online which you can download. That certainly includes the one that we have available on the Better with Money website, which you're very welcome to use. And with your budget, you should consider both the now and the future. So both your income and expenditure may change when you have children. So it's really important to consider exactly what money you will have coming in, but also going out. And if you are in a partnership, then you absolutely should consider joint finances too. And it is really worthwhile sitting down together to make sure you're both really, really clear on what that financial position is going to be. Now, when considering sort of expenditure, try not to just think about that regular expenditure like food and bills. but also looking at the one-off expenses as well. So for example, things like the need to maybe buy pushchairs, cots. You'll also need to maintain some of your usual one-off costs like car servicing and MOT if that's applicable. And this exercise is all about working out what you can afford to spend and then having an idea of how much things are likely to cost as well. And just on that, Money Helper, which is the government sort of website for some consumers, it's packed full of lots of brilliant information, but it has got a useful baby cost calculator, which can really help you with that exercise as well. And again, you know, as somebody who's sort of been through that process, it really can be quite eye-opening around the level of what you can spend if you're not careful on sort of equipment that will, you know, almost do anything and everything for you. But the likelihood is you're going to buy it and then maybe it's not going to end up being essential or even used. So once you've completed your budget, you'll then be able to consider areas where you can cut back on expenditure as well, with the aim to sort of free up any additional income that you'll be able to use on other things. So, you know, could you start to reduce sort of food costs, for example? Could there be subscriptions that could be cancelled? Have you got access to discounts that could make that shopping cheaper? Or even things like switching of energy providers. You know, I know in recent times we haven't had much flexibility around that, but certainly more flexibility is now back in the market. Now, it's also a really good time to consider your wider sort of financial position. So looking at both your debt and your savings. As expenses go up as a parent, it's about considering whether you can reduce any existing debt. Is it worth sort of looking at sort of listing the debt that you've got, when it needs to be repaid, you know, what's going to be affordable, the interest rate that's applicable. And then it's about prioritizing that high interest debt first, because that's essentially costing you the most. And can you afford to pay off more each month? So setting up that direct debit for those repayments, but also thinking about whether you can switch to interest free or look to consolidate debt onto a new lower interest rate. And again, through Money Helper, there's a bill prioritizer tool as well that you may find really useful that can help you with that. It's always worth reviewing your saving strategy as well. So have you got that emergency fund in place? If not, you know, can you start to afford to build that up? Really good money management to have access sort of from 3 to 6 months of your essential spend put to one side. That helps kind of cover any of those unforeseen circumstances, you know, expenses during periods of lower income, but also lots of the budgeting apps have got tools built in as well that can help you with that saving. So once you've sort of worked out your budget, what's then realistic to save, and also that notion of piggy banking. So starting to create those additional pots of money that can be supporting you when perhaps income drops for a period of time, or for those of you that are already parents, thinking about what that child's sort of structure and financial commitments look like. So could you have an account set up that's going to protect things like swimming fees when they come round, or certain sort of sporting subscriptions, school fees, whatever it may be, so that again, you know, you've got that structure that's in place. And also, it's about making sure you're getting all of the income you're entitled to as well. So it's worth visiting the Entitled To website, where you can check what state benefits that you've essentially got entitlement to. You may also be eligible for some charitable grants or other schemes, such as the Sure Start maternity grant and the Healthy Start scheme as well. And, you know, looking at other ways as well that you could maybe boost your income. So that could be, you know, selling of unwanted goods to raise money. I mean, the Money Saving Expert, where there's a link on the bottom of the slide, it's got a whole article on this as well. So that's well worth sort of revisiting or visiting perhaps for the first time. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this slide for too long, but I just wanted to highlight again on the Money Helper website, the baby money timeline, which sort of highlights the important dates and key events that you should be aware of. And those are listed here for you to be able to work through if useful as a little bit of a checklist. But the timeline is sort of super helpful in helping you with planning. So it's definitely worth having a look at, and also making sure that you've sort of covered all angles, both yourself and again, bringing any partners into those conversations as well. Now, I want to sort of move on to looking at the pay that you're entitled to as a new parent, because it very much depends on the type of leave you take. So we're just going to run through the different types, but also signpost where you can go to learn more as well. So the first being maternity leave. So you're entitled to maternity leave if you have worked for your employer for 26 weeks once you've reached the 15th week before your due date, and you need to earn at least £123 per week, and that's due to the national insurance contributions. Now, you'll be entitled to 52 weeks off work. You'll receive statutory maternity pay for 39 weeks of that maternity. So for the first 6 weeks, you get 90% of your average weekly earnings. For the remaining 33 weeks thereafter, you will get the lower of 90% of your average weekly earnings and sort of £172.48 per week. Now, that remaining 13 weeks, if you choose to take it, is unpaid. And it's important to note as well, with any form of statutory maternity pay, those payments are taxable. So income tax and national insurance will be deducted. Now, it's also important to note, for some of you that may be working in quite large sort of firms that have got quite comprehensive benefit package, it could be that you have enhanced maternity pay or paternity pay that is forming part of your employee benefit, part of your contractual rights. So well worth looking at your contract of employment, but also if you've got a HR portal with your sort of policies on there, or you've got a really good HR department that you can reach out to, just sense checking that with them as well. Now, with paternity leave and statutory paternity leave, it enables the employee to take either 1 or 2 weeks of consecutive leave. It must be taken in one go, and it has to finish within sort of 56 days of the birth. Now, timings are slightly different where somebody is actually adopting. You'll be entitled on the same basis as maternity pay. So working for your employer for 26 weeks minimum, you need to earn at least £123 per week. And the statutory weekly rate of paternity pay is the lower of £172.48 or 90% of your average weekly earnings. But again, speak to your HR teams, check your contracts of employment, because it can be quite common for organisations to maybe give an enhanced level of payment that is over and above the statutory entitlement. That's kind of the minimum. Now, when we look at shared parental leave, you and your partner may be able to get shared parental leave and also statutory shared parental pay. So if you're having a baby, or you're using a surrogate to have a baby, or adopting or fostering, you can share up to 50 weeks of leave and up to 37 weeks of pay between you in the first year after your child is born or placed with your family. You can also use these shared parental leave to take in blocks. It can be separated by periods of work, or you can take it all in one go. And you can also choose to be off together, or you can stagger the leave and pay. And you will need to meet certain criteria. So again, it's about looking on the government website to make sure you're clear on that one. It's probably fair to say in current climate, we are seeing more of sort of both partners sharing some of that responsibility now, particularly sort of as traditionally women tended to be the primary caregivers, but due to sort of lots of gender pay gap initiatives, equal pay, it is becoming more common for both partners to want to kind of share some of that responsibility. And employers have come a long way as well with their policies and how they're looking to support people as well. So I really would encourage you to be clear on what your work policies are, and also, like I said, reach out to your HR teams who will be able to provide you with all of the specific information on your place of employment. Now, if you are adopting or having a child through surrogacy, then you might be entitled to 52 weeks leave from your work. If you are adopting as a couple, only one person can get adoption leave, but the other might be able to get paternity leave, or certainly explore the shared parental leave option instead. Now, if you do some research, then the government website is a great place to start, because that will provide you with lots of information on statutory minimums that you can expect financially, what those criteria are for maternity, paternity, parental and statutory adoption leave. But there's also other things that you should think about as well. Things like what your employment rights are and those entitlements whilst you're on leave. So things like accrued paid holiday entitlement, protection from unfair dismissal, as well as flexibility when it comes to other employee benefits as well. And it's really important to know that some employers have much more generous schemes than others. Some will operate on statutory minimums. So it is really important to just check that employment contract and speak to line managers or your relevant HR team. So just to summarise then, it is important to take time to understand the rules around the different types of leave, just so that you know what income you can expect to receive, but also what you need to do to make sure you receive it. And that will all inform the budgeting exercise that we've already spoke about, and allow you to sort of factor in and plan for changes that's going to come to that household income. Now, when we think about sort of leave and parental leave in particular, aside from pay, another important consideration to think about when taking parental leave is your pension. So when we think about workplace pensions, the good news is that your employer should automatically keep your workplace pension contributions same whilst you're on leave. And that's great, because it means your retirement pot continues building even whilst you're off work. Now, you'll see on the slide that sort of a break of just a couple of years can actually make thousands of pounds of difference to your pension at retirement, due to the effects of stock market growth and the compounding effect of that. Now, your choices after parental leave also have an impact on your retirement savings. So, for example, if you chose to return to work on a reduced hour basis, then your pension contributions will probably go down in line with that lower salary. Now, if you decided to move jobs, your pension scheme with your new employer may be less favourable than what you've had currently. And also, if you choose to give up work altogether because you want that time at home to enjoy parenthood, you'll no longer be having those ongoing savings going into your pension, unless, of course, you chose to make those voluntarily yourself. So sometimes really, really difficult to sort of think ahead to retirement, especially when so much is happening in the present with this particular subject. But you will thank yourself in retirement if you focus on it and just ensure that your pension savings always form part of your thinking right now as well. When we think about the state pension, it's worth sort of understanding that as well, because your state pension comes into play when you reach whatever age you're entitled to. So currently, for anybody now born after 1979, it's 68. So that is the latest state pension age that we are working with in the UK. And the amount of state pension that you're going to get is very much based on your national insurance contribution record and the number of years that you've paid in for and credits that have been applied to your record, so to speak. Now, people can get caught out with this when they have children because they may stop paying national insurance contributions for a period of time, which then means that they don't qualify for the full state pension later in life. So a few key points here to consider. Firstly, maternity pay does contribute to your national insurance record, which is great. If your child is under 12 and you're not working or you don't earn enough to pay national insurance contributions, child benefit, so by claiming child benefit, it can help you qualify for national insurance credits. And that then counts towards your state pension. And we'll talk more about child benefit in a moment. And lastly, if you find a gap in your national insurance record, you can make voluntary contributions to top that back up. But remember, it's only worth doing that if you're not going to build up enough qualifying years anyway. So if you're planning on returning to work in the future, the likelihood is you may not kind of end up with any gaps that you need to plug. And you can always request a state pension forecast for free at any point online, which will give you the details of what your national insurance record looks like. And again, it can then help you to make that informed decision. Now, we've looked at the income that you could be entitled to when on parental leave and the potential impacts on your pension. But what do you need to think about when returning to work? Now, it's easy to assume that everything's going to be back to normal when you return to work after that period of absence. But 6 months or a year, it is a long time. There might have been changes at work, not to mention the massive changes in your own life. And we always like to describe these sorts of things as life quakes. They can be really positive sort of opportunities and events that come around, but it's fair to say when they do, they really disrupt the financial landscape around us. So it's really important to know where you stand. Now, in general, you have the right to return to the same job on the same terms and conditions after maternity or parental leave. But sometimes it just may not be practical for you to go back to exactly the same job. So, for example, if the role involved night shifts or, really sort of extensive travel, which perhaps you're not able to commit to anymore. So if that is the case, you've got the right to be offered a similar job on the terms and conditions at least as favourable as your previous role. And if your role has become redundant, you should be offered a suitable alternative vacancy. If there isn't one, then you may then be entitled to redundancy pay. Now, if for any reason you want to change the date that you are due to return to work, you must give your employer 8 weeks' notice of that change as well. Now, you might want to consider asking for flexible working to improve your work-life balance. So that could include job sharing, home working, staggered hours, condensed working. So to request that flexible working, you just need to have worked for your employer for at least 26 weeks, and that does include the maternity leave. But just be aware that you only have the right to ask for flexible working. It is ultimately a business decision, but they do have to have solid grounds. Also keeping in touch. So before you return to work, during that leave, your employer is entitled to sort of make reasonable contact with you. And also, from a financial perspective, those keeping in touch days can be great. So you normally can have up to 10 of them and it's full pay. So for some people, it can really help make them still feel part of the organisation, but also still give them some financial sort of support as well along the way. And again, be mindful of that parental leave as well. You can take up to 18 weeks unpaid of parental leave for each child up to their 18th birthday. So that can really help, especially when children are starting school and there's half terms, summer holidays and so forth to consider. Now, we're just coming towards the end, so I just want to cover off around sort of childcare options and sort of child benefit. Now, with regards to child benefit, the thing to be really mindful of here is from a financial perspective, because although I mentioned before around you can get that child benefit, so that national insurance credit, if you or your partner are earning over 50,000, you will actually then be subjected to the high income child benefit tax charge. So it means you'll start to lose some of that entitlement. The minute somebody goes over 60,000, you have no entitlement at all. But it's your responsibility to stop claiming it. And worst case scenario is if you were over those limits and you hadn't stopped claiming it, you could get a very, very big tax bill that comes in. So this is really where there's some strategic use of your company pension, because if you are about to go over 50,000, you're maybe going to forego some of the child benefit and you've got salary sacrifice, you can sacrifice money to your pension. So it comes off your gross pay, which means you come back under the 50,000, and then it means you've still got full entitlement for the child benefit. So really, really important, this area. Many people have been caught out, and it can be quite complex and it can lead to huge tax bills as well if you don't get it. I've got a slide in here around sort of childcare, so looking at sort of options and costs. So, you know, whether you are considering returning to work, you know, it can be very, very expensive. Childminders, nurseries, nannies, whether you want full-time, part-time. Some informal arrangements can be cheaper or even free. So using grandparents, some sort of play groups or preschools, but also, you know, being mindful of what opportunities that are around you. Now, it's also important to note from a government perspective. So from April of this year, we're seeing a slight change that's coming in, which is great. So eligible working parents of 2-year-olds will actually be able to access 15 hours of childcare support. From September of this year, 15 hours of childcare support will then be extended to all eligible working parents of children from the age of 9 months up to sort of 3-year-olds. And then from next year, September 25, we see eligible working parents with a child from 9 months up to school age will then be entitled to 30 hours. So this has been a real hot topic with the government, and obviously lots of increased support that's coming forward. And, you know, on the slide, there's some sort of web addresses for you to be able to sort of familiarise this. It is a new change that's come in. So therefore, it's best to sort of do that research and have a look at the information that's on there. Now, I've also put some sort of ideas for some money saving tips on here as well that you'll be able to have a look at your leisure. But also the last section to cover is just to make sure that with this change that's happening, protecting your family financially as much as possible. So ensuring things like life cover have been reviewed, nomination of beneficiaries, mortgage covers in place, everything that can protect you against some of those life circumstances as and when they come along. And again, on the Money Helper website, there's a fantastic level of support in sort of looking at this area in more detail, as well as a very comprehensive benefit package that you've probably got through your places of employment. So pulling it all together, we've got a tick list here that could be useful for you to explore. And again, please do have a look at the Money Helper website with lots of hints and tips. And with all of this financial content, if any of you are struggling sort of financially, you know, please bear in mind that you have got the ICE Benevolent Fund. You've also got the Support Network, which is the benevolent fund for the Institution of Mechanical Engineers that do a fantastic job in supporting you in times of difficulty and financial hardship. So please do reach out to them as well. But I hope that's been useful, and I'm going to hand to Sarah for any questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Katie. Really useful information in there. We do have a couple of questions that have come through. So first of all, with regards to parental leave, will your employer cover the pension contributions you would have made or just their contribution?
It's a really good question. It very much depends on the setup of the rules. But what should happen is if it's a salary sacrifice scheme, which includes their contribution and yours, then that same level of pension contribution should maintain. So therefore they take the full cost of that whilst you're in a paid maternity situation. But again, it's worth checking what the actual, the rules of your pension contributions are. But yes, they should cover both.
That's great. Thank you very much. Moving on, how does overtime payments affect the £50,000 benefits calculation?
So it absolutely plays a part, because ultimately, whether it's, sort of basic salary in addition to overtime, at the end of the day, they're looking at your total income for the year. And that's not just you, that's you or your partner. So once somebody in that household goes over 50,000, you start to lose some of the benefits. So overtime would absolutely be taken into account, because it would still be under PAYE, your total earnings for the year.
That's great, thank you. And another question on this seems to be a popular topic. You've touched on it a little bit. We've got someone who's on £52,000 a year. Can they still receive any child benefit?
Yep, so you still would get some. It's just 50,000 you start to, lose. So it's almost like a tapering. Once you then go over 60,000, because of the nature of the tapering, there's no entitlement at all. So there would still be some child benefit that would be applicable at 52,000, because you're only 2,000 over the limit. But again, there's a really good calculator that sits online that you can sort of plumb in that salary and get a feel. But there definitely would be some impact. And it's also making sure your partner also isn't over the 60,000, otherwise then there is no entitlement.